Welcome to Trauma Bay.
Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. That line from Rousseau might not have been aimed at religion directly, but it speaks perfectly to one of the most subtle ways religion operates. It takes the inescapable vulnerabilities of human nature and wraps them in chains that often feel like comfort. Humans are not as rational as we like to believe. We crave certainty, meaning, and belonging. These cravings are not flaws. They're features of how our brains evolved, but they also create openings that can be easily exploited. Religion, in many ways, has mastered the art of stepping into these gaps. Start with fear. Fear of death, fear of suffering, fear of the unknown. These fears are universal and deeply rooted. We are the only creatures aware of our mortality in a fully conscious way. That awareness is paralyzing. Religion offers what feels like an antidote, the promise of an afterlife, divine justice, cosmic purpose. It doesn't actually remove the uncertainty. It simply wraps it in a narrative that feels less terrifying. And because it feels better, people are drawn to it. This isn't simply about comforting stories. It's about psychological dependency. When someone learns to cope with their fear of death by adopting a belief system that promises eternal life, that belief becomes emotionally indispensable. To question it threatens not just the idea, but the emotional stability built on it. The person isn't just defending a doctrine, they're defending their own sense of safety. Beyond fear, there's uncertainty. Life is messy, full of ambiguities, and outcomes that often make no sense. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why does injustice go unpunished? Why do people suffer for reasons beyond their control? These questions gnaw at the human mind. Religion often steps in with simple, sweeping answers. It's God's will. It's a test. It's punishment for sin. The neatness of these answers feels satisfying, even when they don't really explain anything. They offer cognitive closure, a feeling of mental relief that keeps anxiety at bay. Belonging is another powerful lever. Humans are social animals. Isolation threatens our mental and physical health. Religions often create tight-knit communities where belonging is tied to shared belief. The rituals, the language, the shared identity all bind people together. But this belonging is conditional. You belong as long as you conform. The pressure to conform can be immense, especially when relationships, family ties, and even livelihoods depend on it. Stepping away often means risking exile from the only community a person has ever known. Authority plays a crucial role here too. Religion often claims moral and spiritual authority that is beyond question. Leaders speak for God or claim unique access to divine truth. This places them in positions of immense power over believers. When authority is framed as sacred, it becomes almost impossible to challenge. People are trained to accept commands and doctrines without critical examination because questioning is equated with disobedience or even sin. This structure allows religious institutions to maintain control long after their original premises have been debunked or contradicted. Guilt and shame are other tools in this machinery. Most religions develop elaborate moral codes and then declare that failing to meet these standards makes one unworthy or sinful. The weight of guilt becomes a powerful motivator, but it's a problem only religion can solve through rituals of confession, penance, or forgiveness granted by religious authorities. This creates a perpetual cycle of failure and redemption, ensuring continued dependence on the institution offering absolution. Children are especially vulnerable. They're taught from an early age that these beliefs are absolute truths. Before their critical thinking skills are fully developed, they are trained to accept complex metaphysical claims as facts. This early indoctrination becomes deeply ingrained, making it incredibly difficult to objectively evaluate those beliefs later in life. The very capacity to question is often atrophied before it ever fully develops. There's also the exploitation of our need for identity and self-worth. Belonging to a religious group often provides people with a sense of being special, chosen, or part of a cosmic plan. It answers existential questions, not only with soothing stories, but with flattering ones. You are not random. You are known, loved, watched over. This appeal to ego is subtle but profound. It makes the beliefs feel deeply personal and emotionally satisfying, even if they lack any objective evidence. When we look historically, we see how religion has adapted to cultural shifts while preserving these core psychological hooks. As societies modernize, religious narratives evolve to fit new scientific or political realities, but the underlying emotional architecture remains the same. The mechanism isn't about empirical truth, it's about fulfilling psychological needs that remain consistent across time. Religious authorities have often recognized and deliberately manipulated these dynamics. The design of rituals, the architecture of sacred spaces, the power of music and chant, all are engineered to trigger emotional states that reinforce belief and attachment. These techniques aren't accidental. They are carefully refined tools of influence. Once someone feels awe, gratitude, fear, or joy in these contexts, they associate those emotions with the religious framework itself. The experience becomes proof of the belief. Another layer is how religion leverages the human discomfort with randomness. We have a strong tendency to see patterns, even where none exist, a cognitive bias known as apophenia. Religion capitalizes on this by offering narratives where every event fits into a larger, meaningful plan. Coincidences become divine signs. Random misfortunes are framed as moral lessons. This sense of cosmic order is deeply comforting to a brain that naturally recoils from chaos. Social proof is yet another psychological vulnerability religion exploits. When people see that others believe, especially in large numbers, it creates a powerful pressure to conform. The sheer size of religious communities can itself be a form of validation. If millions believe, it feels safer to assume they know something you don't. This herd effect makes critical scrutiny feel isolating and even dangerous. The exploitation doesn't stop with individuals. Religion often entwines itself with political and economic structures to secure power and resources. By aligning with state authority or embedding itself within legal systems, religious institutions gain protection and influence that further insulates them from criticism. In many societies, questioning religion is not just a personal risk, but a political one. Laws against blasphemy, apostasy, or heresy are stark reminders of how deeply these mechanisms are institutionalized. Even charity and altruism, normally considered pure virtues, can be co-opted into this system. Acts of kindness and community service are often framed not simply as good deeds, but as extensions of religious obedience. This allows institutions to wrap moral behavior in religious branding, further binding individuals to the faith. It creates the illusion that morality itself is dependent on religious belief, even though secular ethics and empathy exist independently. One of the most insidious aspects is how religion can simultaneously create the wound and offer the cure. It instills fear, guilt, and a sense of insufficiency, and then provides pathways for redemption that keep the believer tethered to the system. It's a self-reinforcing cycle that can feel impossible to escape from. But none of this is to say that the people who believe are foolish or weak. The systems are expertly crafted to exploit universal psychological tendencies that every human shares. It takes significant effort, education, and often painful personal experiences to step outside these systems and see them for what they are. In the words of Bertrand Russell, the trouble with the world is that the stupid are cocksure and the intelligent are full of doubt. This applies perfectly to the way religion exploits our vulnerabilities. It offers absolute certainty in a world full of doubt. And that certainty is deeply seductive, even if it's built on fragile foundations. At its core, religion thrives not because of the strength of its evidence, but because of the cleverness with which it maps onto our most persistent psychological needs. Fear, uncertainty, loneliness, the need for identity, the discomfort with randomness. All these are exploited to create structures of belief that feel unshakable. But just because something feels true doesn't mean it is true. And recognizing that difference is perhaps the most difficult and liberating step anyone can take.